Hi, welcome back. My name is Mark Fox, and I'm going to be taking you through this webinar on perimenopause for women. This is number 5 of 6. So there is some other webinars that have come before this. So if you're interested in female health, so things like the menstrual cycle, why women predominantly should be doing some strength training rather than the typical things that most women do, or I think a lot of people do in general, but certainly women, and nutrition for women. I also go through a webinar of how to make a strength-based workout that will help women strive into the future rather than taken away. This webinar today is all about perimenopause. So what is the perimenopause, how it affects a woman's body, and then the last webinar, this 6-phase webinar series, is going to be about training and nutrition around perimenopause. So first off, who am I? If you don't know who I am, my name's Mark Fox. I am the bearded idiot, as I call myself. I've been in the industry about 25 years, so a very long time. I always joke when I'm teaching personal training courses that I'm older. Well, my career's older than I think most personal trainers that are on the course, which is quite scary. Um, this is the only thing I've ever really been good at, so I'm still doing it after 25 years. I've worked in various areas of the industry, but I predominantly now teach personal training courses. And then on the side, I also train people online. So I'm slowly moving back into training people because I prefer that than teaching courses, but I'll always do a bit of both. Sometimes I'll teach more courses, sometimes I'll be coaching more people online. And I'm also going back to teaching people in person because I sort of miss that as well. I've taught courses around the world. I've written courses as well. So you're in a good, safe place. That all the information I'm going to give over is from a science-based background. I'm not making these things up. It's what we would call in the industry pro science. Okay, so the information that I'm giving you is going to be tangible information you can take away and actually start to apply. And just a little bit about me, I'm a proper nerd. So if you see anything behind me, Lego and nerdy stuff, that's just me personally. So just bear with me. And yes, I do watch every Harry Potter movie with my wife each year. At the moment, as I'm filming this, we've just finished off that last one, the Deathly Hallows Part 2, and I love it. Anyway, you're not really here for that, are you? You're here to learn about perimenopause. So today we're going to talk about the key hormones that are affected during perimenopause. We're looking at signs and symptoms. We're looking at the importance of the right type of training, how those hormones can be affected your training, and some of the things what you should be doing about it. We'll talk about the mental health part of it and how it can massively affect a woman's confidence and ability to complete day-to-day tasks. And then we'll talk heavily, because I'm a big tech nerd. As well as being a nerdy nerd, I'm also a tech nerd. So I think tracking your health, I think, is really important. And certainly with things like wearables, it's so easy to do now, and I think everyone should be doing it, especially women. Whether or not it's just tracking your menstrual cycle, or it's tracking how your metrics are during the perimenopause or even post-menopause as well. So first thing then is some of the menopause terms that you may have heard before. So I think a lot of people, when they say they're going through the menopause, they're not really understanding what the menopause is. So a menopause, if we look at the middle one of those three, is defined by 12 consecutive days without that reproductive cycle, without that menstrual cycle. So if you spend 6 months without a cycle and then it starts again, you're back into what we call during the perimenopause. So your perimenopause is the phase where your hormones are not quite the same as they were during those reproductive years. So emotionally, physically, you'll start to adjust and you probably won't feel the same. But again, the menopause is that 12 months. So when a lot of people describe the menopause, they're really describing perimenopause. It's slowly going through that next phase of life. And then the third term that we'll use is that post-menopause. So it's the time after those 12 months. So your periods have stopped, and then you are post-menopause in the phase of your life. So the menopause can start at various ages. It tends to be as we're getting as women are getting a lot older in their sort of 50s, but it can start as low as in their 20s and 30s. I think with when I've spoken to GPs, they the numbers they're given are based on detection rates. So when a woman is detected that she's going through the perimenopause, that's going to be a tick of the box of the age, and it does tend to be older. So what I've been told is potentially women could be going through perimenopause younger, but it's not detected. So if you've watched any of the programs that Davina McCall did over the past couple of years, which sort of opens the floodgates of questions, is there's probably lots of women out there that are going through perimenopause, and actually it's affecting them physically and emotionally, but it's not been detected yet, maybe for 5, 10 years. Okay, so I've trained women before that have not felt amazing, and we've discussed perimenopause, but when they've gone to the GP, they've almost been sort of push back and go, no, you're not at the right age yet. And actually, eventually, they've got that reading when they go that it ticks that box of yes, you're in perimenopause, but potentially you could have got there sooner. So if you're wondering, are you at it now? It's going to be a case of going to your GPs and spending some time and talking to them, and maybe get some tests done. It tends to be done on hormone levels. Uh, so if the hormone levels are not out out of what you call out of whack, or in layman's terms, out of whack, then in theory you're not going through perimenopause. But still, you might not feel 100% because those hormone levels are fluctuating. So these slides, just before I go on, sometimes these slides are quite text heavy, and the reason why they're there is not merely for me, it's for you to go back and read over these, because in the folder with these videos, you'll see that there is the slides in PDF form, so you can go back and almost use it as a mini manual throughout these six webinars. So when I push these on, if it looks like there's a ton of information there, don't worry about reading it. Go back later and read that. So what the menopause isn't then. I think this is really important for women to understand that it's not the end. I think, yes, it's the end of the reproductive cycle of your life, but generally it's not the end of life. I've had women come to me and they feel quite demotivated, like their purpose is gone, their kids have grown up, um, and they can't have kids anymore. So it feels like their purpose in life is no more, which is obviously not the case. So there's lots of things that these clients can bring to their families' lives and to their own lives as well. It's certainly not the end. It's just the start of a different phase of life, and so it should be a positive feeling around that. It's not. It shouldn't be a negative feeling. I think people think it's a time to slow down because you're getting older. Okay, maybe 50 years ago, like 50s, 60s was deemed older. Certainly when I started in the fitness industry, like an older client was classed as like 50 or 55. You get cheap memberships, which is just ludicrous. Like I'm 45. I know I look a little bit older than 45, but I'm 45 and I couldn't imagine being called old when in 5 years or even 10 years. It's certainly not a time to be slowing down. Just because you're going through a phase of life and it could be quite difficult emotionally and physically doesn't mean that like it should be a slow down phase. In fact, if you are a mum and your kids have grown up and you've got a little bit more free time, I think it's probably a time for you to start speeding things up, to start challenging you to see what your body can do now. Now you've got the time and energy to put into it. I think a lot of women feel like they lose control because the hormones are all over the place, and that will then affect your moods. But again, I think hopefully at this point, women have got a little bit more spare time or a little bit more energy to then spend time on themselves to gain control, to make decisions that will affect them, not just everyone else. Because I do think women generally have got that caring nature. I know it's a bit of a stereotypical, but they tend to do a lot for everyone else when actually this is a great time to start thinking about themselves. Menopause itself isn't just about symptoms. It is about what I've just discussed. It's about embracing a new phase of life, becoming a bit more empowered with their body to see what they can do and to learn about their body. Uh, and again, what I've spoke to on the previous slide, they're not the same for everyone. So some women will have really quite severe symptoms going through perimenopause. Some women will have more slight. Some women will start early. Some women will start late. So it's not the same for everyone. So I'll talk later about tracking your cycle and things just to help with perimenopause, and certainly having a close knit of women that may be going through the same thing, so you can communicate with each other and share stories. I think is quite a powerful and a supportive thing to have in your life. It's not the end. That's the main one I've got at the top. It's not the end. This is like a great time to start spending time on yourself. So a couple of the key hormones that will fluctuate and will drop during perimenopause is you've got the main female hormone, the estrogen, that you've probably heard of. That will start to fluctuate. So things like bone growth, muscle growth, your metabolic rate will be affected. Your mood in general will start to adjust. Um, Next one is progesterone, which is another hormone that will you have highs and lows during your menstrual cycle. So the estrogen is more the speed things up, more energy hormone. Progesterone is more the calms things down. So stabilizes connective tissues, aids in sleep. So if these fluctuating levels are all over the place and they're dropping, your energy levels are going to drop, obviously, and potentially you hear a lot of women that are going through perimenopause that do have trouble sleeping well, no matter what they do, no matter what sleep hygiene, as we call it in the industry. Like they've got blackout blinds, they've got a silent room, they've got a cold room, all these sort of things. They have a shower before bed, they do some journaling, all the things that you should be doing or you could do to help you sleep, but it still doesn't matter because their hormones are massively affecting their body. And then lastly is the male hormone testosterone. Women do produce this, and this supports um, muscle, gaining muscle mass, maintaining muscle mass, your energy levels, your libido as well. So this will drop. I think a lot of women don't understand, not a lot of women, a lot of people don't understand that men have the female hormones like estrogen, and then women have the male hormones like testosterone as well. So these are the reasons, these are the culprits really that's going to affect your body and your mental state. These are drops. So when you have that hormone replacement therapy or HRT, or some people call it menopausal replacement therapy, these are just putting what we're losing or what women are losing as they're going through this transition through their life itself. So common symptoms. So if you're watching this back and you're going through perimenopause, or you're wondering, right, am I at this stage yet? You could have experienced some of these symptoms. Now, this is not an exhaustive list. There is many more on top of this. Um, Certainly, when I planned these slides, the list wasn't as big, and I showed it to a few of my clients that have gone through the perimenopause, they're postmenopausal, or they're currently going through, and we added a few more on there. So, like hot flashes, you've probably heard of, night sweats, mood changes. I think the big one here, mental clarity, concentration massively. I hear from a lot of women that they can't concentrate for a long period of time. They start off well, maybe they're at work and they've got a work task, but it's very quite short, their attention span. And they also, their memory as well is affected massively. They get quite forgetful, um, almost like they're double in age. They're in their 80s and 90s. The typical like symptoms of someone that's old. Um, that's something that pops up loads and loads more than what I don't think people tend to talk about it. Obviously, we mentioned about sleep, general fatigue, achy joints, um, achy muscles, not feeling 100%, almost some tightness as well. Um, Obviously, weight changes. So they're putting a little bit more weight around the midriff. And then a lot of women do tend to have digestive issues. I think a lot of women have digestive issues during the menstrual cycle, but certainly as you go through perimenopause, it then carries on and maybe even changes as well. So Women can differ from these typical symptoms. So you might have all of them, or you might have a handful of them, or half of them. But certainly, this is going to slowly start creeping into your day-to-day life. I think the issue is, again, going back to detection, is that because it's not an overnight thing that you go from I feel amazing to the next day you've got all these symptoms. They slowly creep in. So you put it down to other things. Again, that's why detection, unless they're doing something like blood tests, is quite difficult to understand if you're going through that, because you just put up with it. Because typically, uh, I don't think women, mums, people that work full time, they don't really have enough time to spend on their health, so they just put it to being like too busy with work, or they're just tired because they've not slept well, or because they've been all night with kids and things. Um, but it will slowly creep in. But it is normal. So you're not broken. That's the thing that people think women need to understand, is that you're not broken during perimenopause. It's just a different phase of life that your body's going through. So generally, the hormones, um, like they will affect things like abdominal fat. So you'll start to maybe feel like you're putting a little bit more weight around the midriff. Maybe you've spent a lifetime, 40, 50 years, feeling like you've got quite a slim six-pack body. During that perimenopause, you may find that even with the same eating habits and maybe same training habits, you may start to feel like you're putting a little bit more weight on there. Because of that loss of estrogen and certain testosterone, you may start to lose muscle, or you may find it quite hard to build muscle, which then compounds that abdominal fat. If you've got less muscle in your body, maybe you've lost it due to something what's called sarcopenia, which is muscle loss, which is typically a symptom of older people, but it can happen really at any age. Um, if you've got less muscle mass, it means that you're burning less calories. So in theory, you could be putting on a little bit more body weight, and that could be around the midriff. Um, so it's going to be quite difficult at this stage to maintain what you've got doing what you're currently doing. You may need to shift training, nutrition to compensate for these hormonal changes. So why the importance of strength training? So if you've watched any of the webinars before this one, I have a whole webinar on like why women should make this a priority over other typical training modalities like cardiovascular work, um, or doing light weights. I'm a big believer of like building the body so it becomes resilient, it's strong, so for day-to-day tasks, and having a little bit more muscle mass. We're not talking massive bulk, because women can't put on a lot of bulk because they don't have enough testosterone like a man would. And to be honest with you, men find it really hard to put on muscle. Women, it's even they've got 10 times less testosterone, so it's going to be even harder. But generally, strength training, so they're getting stronger, will improve bone density. So you'll hopefully decrease the risk of osteoporosis, which we talk about in a couple of webinars before this. Um, and also, if you've got more muscle mass, going back to keeping like the metabolic rate high, means that you're going to burn more calories, which will hopefully stop you from piling on body fat as you get older. Obviously, recommendations, if you want to go back to the second webinar, which is how to build a strength-based workout for a female client or for a female, I always recommend big compound movements. So I'm not a huge fan of doing the things like lateral raises and inside and outside the thighs and glute kickbacks. Big movements that are using multiple joints. So something like a squat is working pretty much all of your legs, your quadriceps, your glutes, a little bit of your hamstrings. It's working your upper body to hold the bar. Something like a bench press is working all your upper body muscle groups, from the ones that you're looking at, like your shoulders, your chest, your triceps as well. These are the things that are going to maintain strength and build muscle in a more functional way. So if you've ever had a program designed by me, maybe you're one of my old clients or you're one of my current clients, you'll understand I've probably brainwashed you. You're probably sort of singing these praises already. It's really important to do these more what I would call functional movements. So when we've spoken just briefly about strength training, we are on the next webinar going to talk a lot more about specifics of the things it should be doing, along with nutrition. Um, but when it comes to cardio, traditionally I think of what women tend to do classes or lots of like things like stairmaster things, um, like long, slow duration type cardio, where your heart rate doesn't go too high. Uh, these are still good. These are great for health. In theory, if you do a good hour of the stair climb, you're going to burn a lot of calories. But then, really, you would do the same thing just going for a walk. To be honest with you, I'm not a huge fan of doing that long, slow duration type cardio where you build your heart up and maintain it. What I'm a fan of for women, and it comes to building muscle mass or maintaining muscle mass as well, is doing things like interval training or high intensity interval training where maybe you do 5 to 10 minutes of work of high intensity work because you're going to burn a lot of calories. It's going to improve your cardiovascular fitness. And if you're doing something like power based training, like the lady there doing battle ropes, med ball slams, kettlebell swings, a sled push, you're also going to maintain or even build muscle mass. So you're going to get cardiovascular fit, so your heart and lungs are going to get better, but also you're going to build and maintain muscle, which is key. And I think as we, I mean, this film is in 2024, so I think our lives are a little bit more stressful than what they have been over the years. We have probably more stressful work life, family life. So I think spending hours and hours in the gym when you're not a 20-year-old living with mummy and daddy, I think it's quite important to pick and choose exercises or activities that you can do that uh, are more short and sweet. So you go into the gym, you work hard, but you know you don't have to spend hours and hours in there. So if you get any programs designed by me, you'll notice that there'll be lots of strength work, and then also there'll be bits at the end where you'll be blowing out your backside, basically blowing out your ass, as I joke with my clients. Because of these reasons, it's really important that you work really hard. Um, so, for example, like I mean, again, next week we're going to cover a lot more of this, but the example I've got there is like strength training 2 3 days a week is more than enough. If you can do 4 5, amazing. But like if you're a busy mum, if you're just a busy, if you've got a full-time job, you've got a family, it's going to be quite difficult to go to the gym more than 3 times a week. So don't worry, don't think that you're a failure not doing more than three or even more than two. Do as much as you can. Two is like a minimum if you can. Three is like that Goldilocks figure, which is just that perfect figure to get to aim for, like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, like every other day. Um, Full body workout, so you're hitting most of your muscle groups each workout. And the reason why I prescribe that is because it's easier to maintain. If you're doing this body part split thing that all the kids do, yes, it will work to a certain extent, but you're going to have to train 5 days a week to hit all the body parts. Full body workouts are key. Compound movements we spoke about, and then obviously hit once or twice a week as well. So ideally, if you go to the gym twice a week, do a bit of strength training with a little bit of high intensity interval work. Um, if you can do 3 times a week, even better. Uh, but that's the recommendations. We will discuss a little bit more next week on more of the specifics, and I'm going to give you some example workouts that you're going to be able to take away. So we talked about the physical. We talked about gaining weight, maybe potentially losing muscle mass, not having much energy. I'm not really painting a great picture, am I? But I think understanding what's going to go through your body, I think, is really important. So when it starts happening, you're not trying to guess what the hell is wrong with my body. You just understand this is normal, and then you can decide how to address it and how to compensate for those differences in energy levels and potentially putting on weight and those sort of things as well. Um, Next, we're going to talk a little bit about mental health. I think a lot of people do talk about piling on weight around the waist. A lot of women, sorry, talk about piling on weight around the waist, their energy levels. But I think this is also a key thing because mentally, if you're not in a good state, that will have a knock-on effect to actually you training. So I'm giving you recommendations of this is what you should be doing ideally for these reasons. But if you're not in a great state mentally, you're not going to want to do that. So you've got to understand that this can happen. So mood swings in general. So we're not talking about like super angry to really sad, but just generally just not feeling yourself. Um, so you will potentially become irritated a little bit easier. Maybe you become sad a little bit more often. Um, you might have bursts of energy. There might be highs and lows. You almost like 1 minute you feel amazing, the next minute you feel really low. Could happen. Anxiety or stress, I've been told by many women, certainly anxiety. So they worry about things far more, and they don't feel confident. So if we're talking about workplace example, taking meetings, replying to emails, having a confrontational conversation with a staff member before they feel confident doing it because they've done it 1,000 times. But during this perimenopausal phase of their life, the anxiety sets in. They start thinking about things a lot more, and they lose a little bit of that confidence, and potentially they become a little bit more stressed because of these reasons. And then lastly, which is one that a lot of my clients talk about, that forgetfulness. You know, we've all done this before when we've walked into a room thinking, I need to go do something, and then you forget. A lot of my female clients do tell me on a regular basis that it seems to happen more often. And then when I spoke earlier about concentration, they also find it quite hard to concentrate, to start concentrating on a task. But even if they start well, it's very, very short. It's almost like they've got attention deficit disorder, is that they can't concentrate on something for long enough. Their mind wanders, or even maybe it comes back to anxiety as well. Something else, some other thoughts come in as well. Um, so completing day-to-day tasks, completing things like exams, tests for work, all those sort of things um, become affected. And again, like dealing with people um, and concentrating on work and life can be quite difficult. Um, so, little strategies for mental health. I mean, this is, I suppose, a lot of this is almost, I think, for a few people, common sense. But we don't tend to do this on a regular basis. We tend to um, forget we can do these things. So the first one is exercise regularly. I've harped on about exercising regularly. Really, it like as much as you can, get moving. It doesn't have to be gym related. It can just be like walking the dog, going for a walk. It will boost your mood. Those endorphins will start getting pushed out, and you will feel a little bit better. Mindfulness and meditation. I'm not a huge fan of meditation. I've tried it a million times. I'm not saying getting on a yoga cushion and start doing some OMS with your eyes closed. Really, I'm not saying that, but generally, like breathing exercises, things like box breathing, is quite useful, or taking a few deep breaths, or just simply maybe when you do go for a walk, you don't listen to anything, nothing stimulating you. You've got time just to reflect on your own thoughts. Is quite powerful. The positive self-talk. I think I'm not. I suppose it's a very British thing, isn't it? Affirmations. I am a beautiful human being. That sort of thing. You look in the mirror. Um, can work for some people. Certainly doesn't work for me because I'm just British. But like mentally saying to yourself, even writing it down, like I am a strong, capable person. I can do this. Can be quite powerful for some women. Uh, Mentioned before, it's not the time to stop. So just embrace this phase, embrace the challenge uh, of this time in your life, and it's not really a time to let go. It's a time to take control. Um, Mentioned about like connecting with others. So it's really important if you know the women that are at similar age or going through the same thing, linking up, creating a Facebook group or WhatsApp group or something where you're chatting with each other and sharing stories and supporting. I think is massive. Obviously, the women that I work with that are going through perimenopause, they can reach out to me, and I can sympathise as much as I can, and sometimes I can be a bit more uh, objective with advice because I'm taken out of it because I'm not a woman. I'm not going to experience it, but I've learned a lot about it. I've done courses in these sort of things. But certainly the empathy part, where a woman could say, actually, yes, I get this, and this is how I felt, and this is how I've overcome that, I think is quite key. So I always encourage people to share their stories with other women that have gone through that. And there's obviously many other ways of looking after your mental health. Like nutrition as well is key. So eating well. Certainly, if you've got a poor diet, it will affect your mood, which then could affect these perimenopause symptoms. On to then tracking. So giving you lots of information about what it is, perimenopause, how it affects the body. Hopefully, I'm not thinking, oh my, you're not thinking, wow, this is doom and gloom. Like information is like gives you the insight to then take in steps to overcome these barriers or obstacles in your life. Putting your heads in the sand is not going to help that. So tracking, I'm a big believer in tracking. Tracking itself can be a bit hit and miss based on the device that you're wearing. Some people it works really well with, some people it doesn't. But certainly giving it a go. So whether or not it's an Apple Watch, a Whoop strap, an Oura Ring, uh, an Android-based smartwatch, or something like a Garmin smartwatch, these things that you wear day to day that will track things like your heart rate. Excuse me, your heart rate, um, your what's called your HRV, your heart rate variability, your recovery basically of basically your stress levels and those sort of things, I think is hugely important through your menstrual cycle. But if you get to that point where you're not having those anymore, transition into tracking perimenopause is going to be super useful because it's going to give you patterns. So as I said earlier, it's not a case of it one minute you feel normal, the next minute suddenly it's the end of the world. It's a slow transition. You're not going to understand these things unless you're tracking it. If you've got it in black and white in an app or on paper or on a spreadsheet or something, whatever what really whatever floats your boat, can massively help because you can look back and go, okay, at this point, this is where I was and this is where I am now. So it can help with changes to the body and um, and mind, but also could be to be a positive thing that helps you then show that you've improved. So you are getting somewhere, you are taking control. Um, so things like monitoring symptoms, the triggers that potentially set off a cause and effects, and that basically means that you can adjust going forward. As I said, that taking control is I think key at this point. Understanding your body, what it's going through, and then complementing that with training, with mental health strategies, with good nutrition are key. But if you've got no clue how to use these devices, I do have some resources on this. Just reach out to myself. Again, I'll give you my contact details later. But tracking's fantastic. I try and get all my clients to track as much as they can, purely because it means that if I've got data, I can take that away and take that bird's eye view with my knowledge and experience of training women and exercise and fitness and see things maybe that they couldn't see. It's a bit like when you're asking someone to read a, a, a page of text that you've written. You won't see those mistakes. You won't see those issues with what you've written, the grammar and things. Where someone who comes in, takes a bird's eye view, can see those things because they've been taken out of it. I'm like that person with my clients. I can take a step back, bird's eye view, and and pick out things that I could see as triggers. Um, so start thinking about tracking to also really to keep yourself sane to show that you're not going insane as there is a reason why you're feeling this way or mentally and physically. Tracking tips. So as I said about using an app, using a watch, there's some recommendations on the slide there. Something as simple as using a journal, pen and paper could be quite useful. You don't have to use this fancy technology that I love. Just a pen and paper, a pad next to your bed, So you want to go fancy like a moleskin journal with a fancy pen that you can write in your thoughts, tracking like scale of 1 to 10. It could be really anything. But I think the thing that a lot of people don't do generally with tracking is that they track their data, but they don't do anything with it. They just look at it and go, "Oh, that's nice. Oh, that's interesting," but they then don't look at how can you put things in place to help those things. Again, that's where someone like a coach like me would come in, is that I look at the data and go, right, okay, that's interesting. We need to address this with this, maybe a nutrition protocol. We need to address this with your training now. So it's important that weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly, you look at your reviews and then start to adjust that. Uh, I suppose that is my job as a coach. I think people wonder, what do you do for an online coach? Is I do a lot of the keep saying the bird's eye view. I've got the client's lifestyle. I'm almost pointing them in the right directions, not just a case of just giving them workouts. It's okay, this is happening. Okay, we're seeing this pattern. Let's adjust it and switch it to do this thing here. You can do that yourself. It's just easier with someone like, obviously, with a coach that sort of knows what they're doing. But certainly tracking is, so many times, it's really quite useful. So please, please, please track your menstrual cycles, track your symptoms when you're going through perimenopause. Really, you you do the same thing with your finances. If you've got a good bank balance, it's probably because you're tracking your spending, your incomings and outgoings. Same thing with health and nutrition. And that's it, John. The webinar is done. So I've given you details on what perimenopause is, what the hormones, how it affects the body, what sort of things you could do to help. So hopefully you've taken some of those bits and they're useful to you, and maybe you can start applying it. I'll give you my contact details in a moment if you want to reach out. But the questions that I had, so these webinars, just to let you know, I do them live, but I then record a separate webinar, because when you're doing it live, recording it, it's a lot more of a stress. So I then record these afterwards. So I'm just going to check on the questions um, that I had during the webinar. One was more about training. So I did address the training questions, what specific things you should and shouldn't be doing. That's coming in the next webinar, so I won't answer that. One of the questions was, would this stay the same? So the recommendations I was giving, would it be the same for someone who is, when we're talking about exercise, someone who's starting afresh, so maybe you've done nothing for years, you're starting to go through perimenopause, you're starting to understand, I need to do something, I need to change my diet and my exercise regime, or start to exercise. Should you do anything different to someone who's been exercising for a long period of time? I'd say no. Maybe what you start with is a lot less and easier to maintain, but generally, it doesn't matter what age you start. You could be 60 years old, you could be postmenopausal, you've come to the end, but the recommendations that I'm giving for female health, for nutrition and exercise, are the same no matter really what age, to a certain extent. Start whenever. The best day to start is today, rather than starting like next week. Um, and then also, someone asked about supplements, like what supplements could help. I'm not a huge fan of supplements. I prefer getting like the nutrients from the foods that you eat, but certainly things like vitamin D, omega 3s have been linked to sort of brain health. Some of the other supplements for training might help, things like creatine and protein powders, but generally all the stuff that you see, except for obviously the hormone replacement, which isn't a supplement, it's a form of medication to help with perimenopause. Really, just stay clear of them. They're all just make believe. Protein powders, caffeine in some form for maybe a training aid. Um, Creatine is really quite useful for all sorts of things, as well as weight training. And potentially omega 3 oils if you don't like oily fish, vitamin D's, and those will certainly help with inflammation, recovery, brain health as well. So maybe symptoms of that perimenopause, but generally just stay clear. Honestly, it's such a waste of money. The supplement industry is not regulated, so in theory, you don't know really what you're taking. We take it like yes, that it's tested. It's not. It's so woolly. The testing on these things. You really don't always know that what you're taking is what you pay for. So don't worry about that. They were the only questions that we had. But if you do have any other questions, then do reach out to myself. Um, Next time, we're talking about more specific training and nutrition recommendations for perimenopause. The questions that I got at the end of this one was lots of this, so we're going to cover those. If you need to contact me, there's my contact details. There's my email, my Instagram profile, YouTube, and obviously my telephone. So if you want coaching, if you need some advice, I've got a ton of resources I can share with you as well. So just reach out. But hopefully you got something from this webinar, and I'll see you hopefully on the next one.